Yes, folks. A celebratory episode of sorts.
Cheerful.
It is Left Reckoning, and it's not early in the episode title, so I have to guess 172.
That's right.
All right,
Not bad.
172.
We're on fire. We're very excited. A lot of good things. A lot of good news, interesting stuff. We're going to be talking with Kurt Hackbarth in a little bit about what just went down in Mexico, which I'm very excited, to chat a little bit about because oftentimes, we're sharing kind of difficult news. But hell, last week we had our good friend Chip Gibbons on the program, and we also got to share some exciting news on Julian Assange. So there's some openings.
That's true.
We're not going to be able to get to it, but in India, the effectively fascist BJP didn't get an outright majority. So, not necessarily perfect news, but definitely better than what some of us were expecting. We'll take it.
I saw, what was it? Edinger Mentum make a joke that it was Roe v. Wade dulling their impact.
That's pretty. Oh man, yeah, but we don't see. The thing is, like, shit's been so bad for so long. Sometimes it's hard to even know what to do with yourself when you get this good news. And in Mexico, significant victory for Morena, which is a very interesting, I think, political project. And we've done a lot of episodes on it with Kurt and with Jose Luis and other folks. I'd love to do a kind of deep dive into thinking about the kind of political party questions that come out of it, because Morena is an interesting party, right? You can't populist, yeah. Right? And with all the baggage that comes with, effectively, of being hard to pin down.
And trying to build some of these cross-border, and we touch on it a little bit with Kurt, between political alliances, because it's one thing to, we've talked very much about like labor unions and their need to, communicate across borders. Definitely our politicians need to get there too. And like I've been, I saw, liberals within Israel upset that Congress, including Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, invited Bibi Netanyahu to come address Congress, right? And look, I don't have, like, they still support, like, uprooting Hamas entirely, right? So whatever. But that also draws a failure. Like, Schumer and those people should not be contradicting each other. And it's a problem when they are. Likewise, Bernie should be in touch with Ofer Kassif's office, who represents Israeli left. We've had him on Majority Report. Like, those connections need to be made, and there's no excuse for not doing it across our southern border, especially like the right wing is standing together on this stuff, right? Like Netanyahu's kid, not. You'll be surprised, in Gaza, helping to fight Hamas. He's like in the States, like doing right wing stuff.
Isn't he in Florida?
Yeah, he's in Florida. In Florida, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like tweeting like Bolsonaro memes.
If we had a real president, I mean, that's some leverage, man. Yeah. It's dark stuff. I mean, we're gonna talk about this in the post game, but Joe Biden's interview with Time was something else, I have to say, even for Biden. But look, we're going to talk a lot more about Mexico in just a minute, and then we're going to be joined by our good friend Mike Recine to talk about being a role model to the rest of us, and his excellent new comedy special, I'm Normal, which people should definitely be checking out. But yeah, there's a couple quick things I just wanted to get to up top. Is that it's been really wild to see, as we were talking about, like, the fact that we haven't seen this kind of alliance and conversations, particularly with Mexico, from the U.S. progressive left. And that's a real shame, frankly, because there's a lot of need for it, right? I mean, hell, the president of the United States, Joe Biden, is effectively, as he's done time and time again, making more and more of Trump's barbarism permanent. And creating a very dangerous situation where the question of asylum, basic human rights concerns, goes out the window for both for the Democratic and the Republican Party. So on that issue, right, there should be a lot more care paid. It's so wild to me. It's just like Mexico is like almost effectively just like the border, right, to a lot of like progressives sometimes, and there should be a lot more investment in what is actually going on politically in Mexico. And there's a lot of lessons that I think people could take from Morena and from this political movement here. You know, some things maybe to learn. To like improve on and all this kind of stuff. But you know what? When you look at a movement like this that has just been as successful as they have been, and you look at the losses in this country and in a lot of other countries as well, right? There's certainly something that's working there. And to be quite blunt, the biggest thing is sort of like showing up and doing things for people, as we talked about with Kurt.
Yeah, and I feel like I saw Bukele with like Tim Cook. Like you got to make these alliances for your own self-preservation.
Yeah.
If you are one of these folks like Bernie, AOC, anyone in that sort of political realm, like this is like what we want to see happen, but you need that too. And like is I mean very useful. We talked to Brian Mayer about when just having an administration that will support, say, a transfer of power to Lula, right? But like these muscles have to be exercised, and these sort of like ligaments have to be built, so they keep the stuff together.
100%. Well, folks, breaking the rules here. Usually, we only have one guest, and we do a couple segments, but we got two guests. Really great conversations. We're going to go in depth with Kurt in just a second, talking about Mexico, some of those lessons. Always great speaking with him. Just FYI, it's sometimes difficult doing those international conversations. Video cuts a little bit in and out, but audio is high quality. So apologies, for that. But so Kurt conversation. Then we're talking to Mike Recine. After that, post-game, patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get access to that. You're not going to want to miss it. We got a lot of really fun stuff there. But look, enough preamble. Let's get to Kurt. Welcome back, Left Reckoners. David here, joined by my good friend and comrade, Matt Leck. How are you doing, brother?
Muy bien, David.
That's the theme of the evening, as we have our good friend and official Left Reckoning Mexico correspondent, Kurt Hackbarth, on the program to talk about this incredible news down there in Mexico. Kurt, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thanks, guys. And now that I know that I'm an official correspondent, I hope to be added to the payroll.
Yeah, all right, that's true. All right. We got some really exciting stuff to get to, and we've been having you on for years now, talking about this transformation in Mexican politics and AMLO. And one of the big questions was what the future of this movement might be. But before we get into some of these kind of big picture questions, Claudia Sheinbaum, elected president of Mexico, the first woman to lead the country. How big was this victory?
How big is big? This was huge. More than the campaign itself expected. It's really interesting that we got up to Mexico City around midday on election day. Mexico votes on Sunday, civilized country that wants people to actually vote. So, we checked in, whatever else, got over to headquarters in the press gaggle there. And then we got upstairs into where kind of the Morena folks were on the fourth floor. And when the first results started coming in, you saw kind of these faces like, oh my God. It's like they expected to win, but they didn't expect to win by 30 points. It's what they call in Spanish a paliza, clubbing. The Morena coalition clubbed the conservative coalition. It was extraordinary. I've got the latest numbers right here. Right now, as it stands, and they've counted just about everything. Claudia Sheinbaum, the Morena coalition candidate, is at 59.3%, and the conservative candidate, Xochitl Gálvez, is at 28%. So she's ahead. She's up 31 points. And there's a third-party candidate in at 10.5. The final polls had her winning around 20, some 25. There were two polls that said that she was going to win by that much, but they were kind of dismissed as outliers. So it's interesting here that the polls systematically underestimated Morena support, which is interesting. And not only that, Claudia Sheinbaum is going to win. Is going to be the next president of Mexico with a a huge mandate. Morena swept Congress, which is just as important. They're not only going to have majorities in both houses of Congress, but they're going to have qualified majorities of 2/3 in the lower house, the House of Deputies, and the Senate. It's going to be very close, but they're right around there, which means that Morena will be able to pass constitutional level reforms on their own.
Wow. This is, I think, like a very important part, and I want to talk a little bit about what the next few months look like. But before we get there, I just want to ask one quick thing too, because one of the things that we talked about on this program, I believe the last time we had you on, we were talking about the fact that the right was already trying to lay the grounds for maybe doing a Trump style, election denial. And it was really funny to see. I mean, there were some attempts, right?
Yeah.
Could you take us through that on the night of? Because it was one of those things where it's like, you can't do it with these kind of numbers.
Not when you're losing by 30.
It's like blaming the refs. It's like blaming the refs when, you lost by 3 touchdowns. It's like you just sort of gotta accept defeat there.
Trying to get some kind of, gin up some kind of penalty. So as we've talked about, right, in the previous programs, the right knew that they were going to lose this election. So they were already trying to lay the groundwork to take it, into the courts, lawfare, right? Mm-hmm. And they were trying to lay the groundwork saying this is an election of state, and AMLO interfered in the election, or the social programs were buying people off. Right, this is their talking point. Right, these universal social programs that was part of the Morena package. Right, or that AMLO's morning press conferences skewed the campaign, and etc. Right. Then they also tried the narco president, the narco party bit with ProPublica, with the New York Times, with the Deutsche Welle, and with Inside Crime. Right. Something that, the conservative candidate, Xochitl Gálvez, then tried to bring up in the debates and whatever else. The problem is she was such an incompetent candidate that none of these attacks were able to stick. She was all over the place. It's like they had something in her ear saying, go negative, go negative. So she went negative on one thing, and then she went negative on another, and then another, and she was all over the place. And it was like, people were like, what are you talking about? Plus her own series of gaffes, right? At one point, the conservative candidate said, if you're 60 years old and you don't have, a house of your own, basically you're a loser, right? Where in Mexico, it's been so historically difficult to get to home ownership, right? For so many institutional reasons. So it's basically setting people up to, not be able to do something and then blaming them for it. Just before the election, the conservative candidate here from Mexico City decided on a great plan that all of a sudden the metro, that this great subway system here in Mexico City, which costs 5 pesos, which is the equivalent of 30 cents to go huge distances, decided that all of a sudden, if he wins, they were going to charge metro fares based on distance, right? A lot of the poor people in Mexico City live on the outlying periphery, right? What are known as the informal, los informales, las colonias informales, people coming from the country and whatever else, living way on the outskirts, up on the mountains, up on the hills. So it's basically a tax on the poor. Brilliant closing strategy there, right? So a lot of unforced errors in the opposition. So on the night of the election, Xochitl Gálvez comes out and doesn't concede and said she won. It's like, come on. This was only helped by the fact that the National Electoral Institute performed very badly and was very late coming out with their official exit poll, and was very late coming out with early results, with what's called the fast count. So it left things in limbo for a few hours, both at the national level and here in Mexico City. Now, there was no doubt about the result, but that the fact that there wasn't anything official coming out from the official Electoral Institute led people to all kinds of, feverish speculation that you do when you're losing and you try to gin up a news out of nowhere, right? So that didn't help. Finally, close to midnight, polls close here at 6. The Electoral Institute comes out and says, yes, Claudia is way ahead, right? The official Electoral Institute says. And so, Sheinbaum comes out, of her hotel room and finally makes her announcement. We won. And Xochitl Gálvez admitted she lost. She called and conceded defeat. Only the next day to walk that back and say, no, I'm going to take the election to the courts. So she's all over the place, which doesn't really add much credibility to her efforts.
Yeah, and I mean, when you win with these kind of numbers. I mean, they might make us think for a little while, but it's very clear what the people of Mexico want. And, maybe to take us to Claudia a little bit, I wanted to read this short bit from your piece in Jacobin, Claudia Sheinbaum's Victory is a Triumph for Mexico, which there's a link below for people to read. But you wrote that every time someone would insist on the need to create a more individualistic image, as if she were marketing a new brand of cereal or detergent, Sheinbaum would calmly explain that she represents a social movement and that her administration will proudly be the segunda piso, second floor of Mexico's fourth transformation. Could you talk a little bit about like how she was able to do this campaign? Because I think that's a really astute and interesting point, right? Because so much of the coverage in the U.S. right now is like, oh, handpicked successor. She doesn't really have any charisma or any political talent, any real understanding. She's just like a kind of puppet for AMLO. But from what I've been getting from your reporting and from talking to other folks and watching what I've been able to watch of her, I mean, she really seems to be somebody who, contrary to the kind of claims of Morena, the kind of criticism of Morena we get in the U.S. that it's like, oh, it's a cult of personality, it's only AMLO, it's only AMLO. Is somebody who's actually really trying to translate this kind of political opening that has come via AMLO into a sustained social movement.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And it's been really interesting watching the foreign press descend upon Mexico, right? Here and there, swanky hotels here in the city. And all of a sudden, they're so surprised that Mexico, that is such a machista country, could have elected a woman. And so, so easily, by such a wide margin, right? It blows their circuits, right? Because they just, on one hand, they say Mexico is machista, but they come here repeating these inane talking points that she's a puppet of AMLO. That's the machista discourse. That's a machista discourse, right? To say that she's a puppet of AMLO. Right? Without even investigating who she is, what she's done, how she ran the campaign, how she's governed, and the number of places she's governed. She's just, she's a puppet. Because they don't know crap about what's been going on in here. Crap. So all they come down is repeat their talking points. I've seen correspondents say, Mexico is the most machista country in the entire Western Hemisphere. I'm sorry, how the F do you measure that? Do they have their machista meter out? This is the most machista country? Right? While they're repeating that. Right. And so to your point, and it's important, they tried to throw Sheinbaum off throughout the whole campaign, goad her and throw her off. So the conservative candidate would go after her saying that she's a cold authoritarian woman. Right. Which, women always get. Right. When women have power, they're always, accused of being, cold, distant, authoritarian. Right. And then she would go after, her family stuff, a business her father had, how they built their house, just all this stuff. Dog whistling her, her Jewish heritage, right? Mm-hmm. During the debate, she just one attack after the other. American-style campaign. You could see that they had obviously imported it from American-style negative 30-second spot-style campaigning. These overpaid American, advisors that come down here and try to spread their toxins into other countries. Very clear. Very clear. Or people educated in the U.S. Right? Claudia would just look at the camera and just, brush off the attacks. So she wouldn't be goaded by any of that. The other way they tried to goad her is with what you just said. She's not her own person. She's, a shadow of AMLO. She's a puppet of AMLO. She's going to be like Medvedev to Putin, right? All this nonsense, right? And she just had to calmly point out time after time, I am not going to distance myself from the president. I'm not going to distance myself from the party. I'm not going to distance myself from this movement because it's not just me. I'm the representative of a social movement here that's behind Morena. So in her victory speech that night in the Zocalo, she specifically said, I want to talk about all of the movements that were here in the square before us, many of which were, severely repressed, repression, police, army, deaths. Killings, disappearances. We're talking about, the trade union movement, the famous, the ferrocarrileros, the famous trade union of Demetrio Vallejo, the student movement of 1968, right? That was, 150 of them were mowed down in Tlatelolco, right? The women's movement that got us here, right? The teachers, the teachers are on strike right now in the Zocalo, right? All of this. Right, and she also read out a list kind of shout outs to important women throughout Mexican history. So she refused to be goaded on this idea that I have to distance myself from AMLO to show to who, right, that I'm my own person. So I'm a part of a movement, right? And the voters clearly rewarded her for it, right? I'm sure she would have lost votes if she tried to distance herself. And about why are you going to distance yourself from someone who has an 80% approval rating? Just from a practical point of view, that's just dumb. There's not some, Morena inside polling unit.
It's also a fake principle. There's no way any of those people saying, "Oh, the handpicked successor." If there wasn't a handpicked successor, and AMLO was, for instance, running for another term, they'd be like, "Look at this authoritarian who can't find anybody to take over power," which they commonly do to other leaders. So yeah, and also we have 2 people running for president who are about 80. So I think like the picket successors thing, like it'd be nice actually. That's maybe a sign of a functioning political system as opposed to one that's not.
And it's just so dishonest, because first of all, she wasn't a handpicked successor. There was it was an internal process in the party to external opinion. And it's just dishonest because these are the same people who, as you point out, spent 6 years saying AMLO is going to change the Constitution to try to reelect himself. Same people. Even El País, which we called out, right? Included this bogus charge in the translation of a piece from Spanish into English, which never even said that. Right. So they were trying to subliminally propagate this idea that AMLO was going to try to reelect himself, right, which is forbidden by the Constitution. When that, instead of saying, well, we got that one wrong, they just pivoted to, he's going to be the power behind the throne. He's going to be the power behind the throne, and he's going to be the puppeteer, right? So there's no point in even arguing with these people because they'll never admit they were wrong, and they will just pivot to the next wrong argument or the next lie. And if this doesn't turn out to be the case, they'll just pivot to something else.
And again, and the reason they have to do this kind of thing is because, Morena and AMLO have been extremely popular and have achieved so much for everyday Mexican folk. But I want to ask you this really, really quick, a little bit on Claudia, kind of personally and her persona, because I will say I've been fairly impressed with her ability to sort of like embody a lot of this movement without, I don't know, like, campaign maybe in the way that I would expect somebody to have campaigned. She has a very different vibe than AMLO. I think that's fair to say. She's very much a Mexico City individual, highly educated. Could you talk a little bit about her kind of persona, how she's been able to make that kind of connection with the everyday people in Mexico? Because she won huge numbers in parts of the country that you might not have expected her to win in. And then as an attachment to that question, we're already sort of hearing this from people on the left, like the U.S. left at least, like naysayers. Oh, this is a PMC. Basically has taken over the populist movement, and now we're going to get these kind of more less class-based kind of politics and much more kind of PMC, professional managerial class style politics from her.
Okay, a couple of things to say on that. You're right; she has a totally different vibe, right? Part of the the secret sauce for AMLO is he comes from lower middle class family shopkeeper background. Right, in a provincial state in Tabasco, speaks with a very clearly regional accent, right? So he was the outsider coming into Mexico City, right, and always played that part very, very well. He cut his teeth in politics in the 90s in Mexico's democratic opening, leading marches into Mexico City and camping out in the main square in the Zocalo, insisting that the then regime at the time respect the initial victories, the initial electoral victories of the opposition. So he was the outsider from the provinces, sleeping outside in tents in the Zocalo, which also did after the 2006 electoral fraud, right? Sheinbaum is a different, it's a different trajectory. She came from Jewish Eastern European heritage, communist family, right? Red diaper baby, who family was very involved in '68, right? And similar related movements, right? Grew up in the state of Mexico, basically in the Mexico City metropolitan area, cut her teeth in the student movement in the 80s, which was every generation of Mexican students has a student movement to protect free education at the public university level, the UNAM, the National Autonomous University of Mexico, which is one of the most important universities in the world. Free. If you can get a slot, it's free, and it's an excellent education, right? But every generation, the conservative governments are trying to, do tuition fees, right? And so, the student movements have always been batting that back. There was a big one also in 99, 2000, right? Of course, 68 and before. So that's how she cut her teeth in activism. So I think it's misleading to say she's going to be a PCM kind of person, because she's actually comes from a more ideological left position. AMLO is more of a nationalist populist, right? Which overlaps with the left in a lot of things, right? But it's a nationalism populism that comes out of the Mexican Revolution, right? A very Mexican style left, right? Reinforcing Mexican sovereignty against the big behemoth, against the beast, the U.S. beast, right? Whereas Sheinbaum, a little bit younger, comes from a more ideological left position and has been in left politics ever since she was a student. That I think that's an important point to make. That said, there is a danger here. She is from middle class background, and when you say middle class in Mexico, you really mean like upper middle class, right? Considering how poor Mexico is. Right? She's a physicist. She studied. I think it was Berkeley. She got a PhD in energy engineering. It's going to be important for the climate transition here, right? And Mexico's water crisis and drought crisis. She speaks English. She gives interviews in English. So she looks closer to the U.S., white middle class journalistic gaggle, right? She looks somebody. But I'm not sure that's the case. I think she's really, and AMLO has said this, the next president is going to be more to the left than me. Watch out. Now, we'll see how this plays out in practice. But AMLO said she's more ideologically to the left than I am.
It's one of those things. It's difficult to predict the future, but it's hard to imagine with this kind of mandate that we're not going to see significant delivery on a lot of these kind of planks and the continuation of the AMLO government. On this, could we talk a little bit about how big the kind of congressional victories are for this project? And on that, like, two questions: is one, what this might mean for her tenure as president, but two, right, they sit before the president is inaugurated, so AMLO will have this Congress.
That's right.
For a month. So, and so there's been a lot of talk about maybe changing the Constitution. So could you give people a little bit of a sense about, one, how important this victory is, and kind of practically, like, what might be coming?
So this is very important. Morena in 2018 had won majorities, but they didn't have the qualified majority. So they always needed other party support to pass their constitutional level reforms. Just to kind of give context for U.S. viewers, the Mexican Constitution is much different from the U.S. Constitution. It's much longer, as 25 articles, and it's much more of a programmatic constitution, right? This is the post-revolutionary Constitution of 1917, right? The first major revolution of the 20th century. So there's a lot more in there that wouldn't be in other constitutions that are just more skeletal, right? So you have things in there like the minimum wage, like health, like education, social things, labor laws and such, right? So the Mexican Constitution has changed much more quickly. Right? So it was changed very much during the time of the PRI hegemony and such, right? It's not like the U.S. Constitution that they made the change, right? Especially in the current conditions. So one of the changes that AMLO made, just to give an example, was to raise the national pension to the constitutional level, right? So it's in the Constitution now, old age pension. So it's that much more difficult to roll it back. That's what they do. They try to kind of lock it in the Constitution, so any future government can come and just take a simple majority and get rid of it, right? So as you said, AMLO now is going to have a couple months of a nice big thumping majority in Congress to kind of go out, and he's got a list of 20 electoral or constitutional reforms that he wants to get through, as many as possible before he leaves. This is someone who started, hit the ground running as soon as he was president-elect, and this is somebody who's going to be governing until his very last minute in office, right? There's no lame duck period here. It's really interesting to watch this man, work. He has his security cabinet at 6 a.m. At 7 a.m, he comes out and does his morning press conference, which lasts 2 and sometimes 3 hours a day. And then, starts doing his regular governance, between 9 and 10, and then goes and goes and goes. And then is, out in the country the rest of the time in the weekends, flying coach to, supervise infrastructure and public works programs. And now they're trying to get the national health system going before he leaves office, because that, that was delayed by COVID and such. Right? So that's interesting to see what's going to happen in this interim session, right? And then whatever Sheinbaum can pick up from there. One of the more interesting reforms that I'm keen to see is giving more rights to indigenous and Afro-Mexican populations, right? That's number one of AMLO's constitutional reforms, right? That was a demand from the Zapatista times, right? To have more legal autonomy for indigenous peoples. And that never got passed. That was stymied in the late 90s. And that's what led the Zapatistas basically to kind of change tactics and change strategy and go more into a local strategy of building local governance, right? That was stymied at the time. And, 20, 25 years later, that's come back, among other things.
So, on this, let's talk a little bit. I'm going to have to take you stateside for a second, Kurt, because it's been very funny watching people react to this. And, one of the big things in the U.S., and we talked about this a little bit before we went live, Matt and I have been texting about it, has been this kind of weird way that, Claudia is Jewish. And the way that this has been sort of covered has been interesting, particularly with certain parts of American Zionists, frankly, saying that Claudia is not really Jewish. And we have this, which I just think was absolute gold. I don't know if you got to see this, Kurt, but this is Todd Rickman, who is the co-chair of the Democratic Majority for Israel, which is a really nasty political organization here in the States.
I hadn't seen this.
And he tweeted out, for people who are listening, he tweeted out, important to note that she is not involved in the Jewish community, and she thanked Jesus for her victory. Could you help us out here, Kurt?
Yeah, and the response is Chef's kiss there. That's her husband's name.
Well, I mean, I love this for a lot of reasons, I have to say, is because it does really show, it's something that really does piss me off, is this kind of like helicopter, momentary expert kind of thing that happens whenever there's an election in another country. A bunch of people tune in and they get secondhand information and they start, I figured out what's going on. Yeah. So she was thinking, again, if it wasn't clear for anybody, she was thanking her husband, whose name is Jesus.
It's like that meme, of the U.S. white Thanksgiving. Thanks Jesus for the food, and then the next panel is Jesus, the picker in the field, saying, "You're welcome. You're fucking welcome for your Thanksgiving." It's just. This is off the charts. We've talked about this. I've been covering the whole AMLO government from beginning to end, over the course of 6 years. I think saying what was good and calling out what hasn't been, right? But doing it from a position of being interested and curious as going on the ground, and trying to see it as as Mexicans are seeing it. And not this idea of, I'm going to project from a totally different situation, my idea onto Mexico, and, in the process, belittle this other process that's going on that I'm not curious or interested enough to find out more about on its own terms, right? Not through my lens, but on its own terms, right? And so you get this. I was on, just yesterday over, Morena has a television channel, online television channel called Cuatro TV, right? And we were on a panel with the DSA contingent that came down for electoral observers. And it was actually a very interesting panel, right? And point, this dismissive idea of they're not left enough for me.
Yeah.
It's like, well, they're not trying to be left enough for you. They're trying to be left for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not trying to satisfy you. And maybe you should just kind of, just park the privilege and just see the process, right? And part of what the DSA folks said, and they were very disappointed with this, Claudia Sheinbaum has gotten all kinds of, congratulations from leaders around the world, right? Even Biden put out a reasonable communique on this.
Yeah.
Finally, just got that one right. That's the pretty low bar. Congratulating someone who won by 30 points. But it's a pretty low bar, but at least did that. But where was Bernie? Where was AOC? Where is the squad on congratulating Sheinbaum? Nowhere to be seen. Maybe they did it today.
Wow.
And I haven't caught
that's an interesting
but
point.
Nothing.
I think that's a really important point that, people have said, and you might have said it, I might have said it, and I'm not trying to quibble about the words, but having a little humility. I don't even know if it's humility is like, hey, if you want to win, why don't you look to what's working? And look, we talk about left populism a lot on this program, and some of the kind of party formations and things like that we would like to see. There is no political project apart from, and even that I can't say you can call it a success at this point. The return of Lula, I don't think it has been as radical as we might have hoped. Mm-hmm. This is out of that 2010s, the left populist movement. I mean, this is the most long-lasting and successful of those movements. Maybe Bolivia. I don't want to, but there's no doubt about it that you can't. You have to be looking at what's happened in Mexico for a lot of reasons. One, because of these numbers. And two, because if you're sitting here as a leftist in the United States and trying to think about, all right, how could we get to power? I mean, seeing the kind of, incredible rise of Morena, in a short while shows exactly the kind of thing that we would probably, if we want to be moving quickly, what kind of mode of politics we might need to be practicing here.
And, these are understandable things. Right? What did Morena do for the working class? Well, increase the minimum wage, 100%, right? Over the course of 6 years, and Sheinbaum says she's going to continue these annual increases. Still not high enough, but that has had a knock-on effect in salaries. Union reform to give secret ballots for elections, right? And before you'd have raised. Can you imagine raised hand union elections? I mean, that's just you're just you're paying. And requiring the renewal of union contracts, strictly limiting out, which they were using all the time to evade labor laws, right? Increasing the Christmas bonus, increasing paid vacations, right, from 6 days to 12 days a year, up to 30 a year, depending on how many years of service you have, right? Profit sharing, right? These are things that speak directly to the working class. It's not rocket science. You do something for people. They're free. I mean, it's and so what we saw is a process of what the analyst Edwin Ackerman has called realignment. Where everywhere else is the de-alignment, right? Working class is abandoning. Here you see more working class votes for Morena, and of course, I mean, it's just because they're doing stuff for you. And it's funny because it's like this category of things that are okay when the rich do it, but not when the poor do it, right? When the rich, lobby for their in politics. When the poor lobby for their interest, it's called being bought off. And that's what the U.S. press is saying. All the Morena voters are bought off. Mm-hmm.
So I have two different topics that it might be a little bit more difficult, but I want to talk about one thing because I think it's the first thing that a lot of people were asking in the U.S. because understandably it's something that is very kind of close to people's hearts. It's something that they're paying a lot of attention to. Is what is Morena more broadly and Claudia Sheinbaum's kind of orientation towards the genocide in Gaza. And actually, and on that, and I know that's a big question, but I'd also like to ask too, if you could give people a sense who might not know, for example, familiar with Mexico politics on a regular basis. I mean, how much this is a kind of issue in the country in the first place.
So, yeah, I think one thing to point out is that foreign policy is generally not as much on the table in Mexican campaigns as in U.S. campaigns around the world, right? It's just not as much as an issue in Mexican campaigns. So it didn't come up very much in the campaign. Maybe not as much as it should have, right? So that allowed Claudia to be very circumspect about the issue, right? Because, and the opposition wasn't talking about it either because they're pro-Israel, so they wouldn't say anything. So it's really interesting how little it came up during the campaign. Just very different situation there. The second thing to point out is, Mexico is already well ahead of the U.S. in this. They recognized Palestine last year, well before the current phase of the conflict got underway. Mexico, along with Chile, has taken Israel to the International Criminal Court, right? They launched that a few months ago, and just a few weeks ago signed on to the South African case in international court.
And on that question, just to help me understand, and then our listeners to understand, I mean, would Claudia have any involvement or with those kind of decisions as like a high and important figure in Morena, and obviously now their presidential nominee?
I imagine she would have. Yes.
Yeah.
I imagine she would have. Claudia is obviously Jewish, but she's obviously a Jewish leftist. I think she's very much more a Jewish voice for peace kind of person, right? About 10 or so years ago, she wrote which has been, a lot of attention has been given to that, saying, I'm in favor of the cause of Gaza, right? This was, before she was a presidential candidate, of course, right? But she's on the record as saying that. Now,
and in fact, for our listeners, I will just say, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but the framing that she used is almost exactly the same as the one that our good friend and Michael Brooks used in that very famous video of him, where he says, "It's because of my Jewish values that I oppose what's happening."
That's very
she used almost verbatim that.
That's right.
To elect a Jewish woman president, it's because she's not belligerently a Zionist.
They're not thrilled about it.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. The Zionist lobby in America is so against this person. Yeah, anyway, keep going.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. Israel and AIPAC and the Zionist lobby would be playing this up to the hilt if they thought that it was to their benefit. And they've been quite, they've been quite silent, and there haven't been more critical pieces on it in Haaretz or whatever, right? So I think that's indicative. Right. And this is somewhere that the Morena left and the left in general in Mexico have been active on. I mean, there's been a lot of pro-Palestine marches throughout the country, Mexico City and throughout the country. And when Mexico's Foreign Relations Secretariat has been lukewarm, the Morena left has been right there and been very critical of them. And I think it was the Morena left that has nudged the Foreign Relations Office ministry into joining the South African case. Right. I think it's important to remember, and I think this is the case in a lot of countries, there's this idea that you have to leave foreign policy to the quote-unquote experts and whatever else. And so the Foreign Relations Secretariat here is full of holdovers from the old government, right? And you see a real class difference. You see it, for example, in the consulates and the embassies in Mexico City. The consulates in Mexico are run by upper-class Mexicans. And it's the working-class Mexicans that need these consular services, and you can see the clash all the time. Mexicans in the U.S. hate their consular services a lot, and that's something that the Cuatro T didn't clean out a lot. So you see this inertia in Mexico's Foreign Relations Ministry. When they recognized Palestine a year ago, it's like you did the right thing, but they did it so quietly that nobody even knew. When they joined on the South Africa case a couple weeks ago, they didn't announce it themselves. It was The Hague that came out with the press release 4 or 5 days later. So you can see them trying to do the right thing, but under the table so that nobody sees it. Which is, it shows, you can see the ambivalence at work here. So, this is something that's going to have to come from the grassroots to push, depend on any governing person to do the right thing on our own.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll just have to be getting you on a lot more over the summer. I do want to hit one last thing, just because I know it is the one thing that gets written about with every piece I've read in Financial Times or in the Atlantic or New York Times has been crime, and particularly this quote: "This has been the bloodiest election in Mexico's history." So were one of the headlines that I saw floating around, and then again this constant insinuation that basically the cartels are, aligned with Morena, are aligned with AMLO, and now aligned with Claudia Sheinbaum. Could you give our American audience a little bit of orientation to how they should be sort of interacting with those stories and how they relate to what's actually happening in Mexico?
Well, no one's going to doubt that violence is a problem in Mexico. That would be silly to do. And there were a number of assassinations of candidates throughout the campaign, as there were in 2021 and in 2018. Most of them at the municipal level, right? But that doesn't make it any less tragic. AMLO inherited a very high violence situation, has managed to bring it down about 20 to 25%. But if you have a high figure and it's 20% less, it's still a high figure, right? And that, nobody's going to deny that. But to go from there to say that Morena was allied with the cartels, that's just a total fabrication, right? And that's what the ProPublica tried to do. That's what the New York Times tried to do, right? That's what the U.S. press in general tried to do, basically feeding talking points to the right, which the right-wing candidate then tried to bring up in the debates, with no proof. With no proof. None whatsoever. Right? It's actually the former security minister for Felipe Calderon who's in jail in the U.S. for being in cahoots with That said, the public has been patient and understanding with Morena on the violence issue, because they knew that Morena inherited a problem, right? That has to do with a lot of things. It has to do with corruption. It has to do with U.S. weapons, right? It has to do with with U.S. demands, but it also has to do with inherent problems to the old regime in Mexico. People have been patient on that. They're not going to be patient about it, forever. And one of Claudia's talking points, and rightfully so during the campaign, is that she's reduced violent crime 50 to 60% in Mexico City. 50 to 60%, right? So they couldn't really go after her on that point and make it stick, right? So I think that the big point to remember here is, this was an old regime which was corrupted from top to bottom, and that includes state and local police. That includes full ministries here. How long did it take the U.S. to go after the mafia? Did they get rid of it in 2 or 3 years? Did they get rid of it in 6 years? Right? Would anybody think that would be possible? No. No, actually, no. Right? So I think that's what we have to look at, and I think that's part of the causes of this. And then it has to do with wages, it has to do with employment, it has to do with the social programs and the social infrastructure, and even things like sports and culture, right? Which Alma didn't talk about as much. All kinds of ways to and the social fabric here, right? They mentioned in this DSA panel yesterday, which is interesting, this idea that the U.S., when the U.S. intervenes in countries, it doesn't want to develop countries; it wants to de-develop countries. Right? That's really the U.S. goal: to de-develop countries. And what happened is the U.S., through its 30 years of Plan Merida and Fast and Furious and all kinds of things, contributed to the de-development of communities. So recreating a social fabric takes some time.
And like, again, like, people really need to understand, like, I think a lot of our Bernie Sanders audience, folks like that, understand like what NAFTA did to the United States. What NAFTA did to Mexico has been decimating. Because I think a lot of Americans, they think Mexico is a poor country and it's sort of like always a poor country, right? And don't sort of realize that like there have been like the deindustrialization of the United States has coincided with an increased impoverishment of Mexican workers. That doesn't create, a kind of bedrock that is that creates a situation where it's very easy for organized crime to thrive.
If you're a poor Mexican, over the last few decades, your choices are very limited in life. You could go to a shit-paying job. You could immigrate. You could go into the army, or you could go into the cartels. That was it, basically. And which of those four paid most? Obviously, the cartels. Obviously, it reduced your life expectancy drastically. But if you're in that desperate straits in life, that was a trade-off that people were willing to take. That's how stark it was.
And
I think that's what people understand.
And ironically, it's the party and the movement that's trying to change those conditions. That's the one that is the big problem, according to the American commentary. But we're out of time. I really wish we could get into a lot of other things. But good news to the audience here is, Kurt, you have a really great resource for them to be learning more about Mexico and keeping up with everything. Could you tell them where to find your work along with our good friend Jose Luis?
Yeah, thanks. In addition to my articles in Jacobin, we've got a new initiative that we started a few months ago called Soberanía, which is the Mexican word for sovereignty, which I think is a really key word in all this. So Soberanía, the Mexican Politics Podcast with my good friend Jose Luis Granados Ceja, who also writes for U.S. media. So he's writing for Al Jazeera and for Truth Out, so really another good person to follow. So we do a once-a-week show that comes out on Tuesdays. This week's is going to come out on Wednesdays because we've been catching up on things, and we did a live stream on Sunday. But, I think it's a really interesting way. We do an hour show to get some English language analysis of what's going on in Mexico that you're not going to get somewhere else. And we always end with what's become our most popular segment, the dumb article of the week, which people clamor for because there's no shortage. And I think, David Frum's foaming at the mouth raving post-election, I think is probably going to be our one for tomorrow. So join us over at Soberanía. We have a good time. You can think, I don't want to listen to Mexican politics for an hour. We make it fun. You can do it wherever else. We have it on YouTube. We have it on Spotify. We have it on Apple Podcast. If you don't want to see our faces, you can just listen to the audio.
But why would you do that?
Yeah, why would you do that? And we're celebrating this week. I'd be smoking a cigar here, but I'm in a hotel room, and it would get the sprinkler system going on. Just to end, the left can win elections. The left can win elections
and be popular.
Right? Morena has a cross-class coalition. I know that makes some people nervous because why would you be in a coalition with your class adversaries? And that's something maybe we can talk about in a different episode. But Morena won with primary education, with secondary education, and with college degrees. And decreasing percentages as you go up. But they won across those strata, right? By offering a really a broad program. Now Mexico is a different country from the U.S. It's that understood. You can't just transfer something into somewhere else. But I just want to leave people with the optimism that this is possible. They just won by 30 effing points, with everything against them. Foreign, international media, the national media is just as bad. All races, the European Parliament, the State Department, the DEA, anything that a global South country, has to go up against. Just since Claudia won, the peso there's been a run on the peso, right? It's lost ground against, right? The stock market has gone down. Right, it's just they always try to play these things. All that they maintained a class coalition along with it. So I think we can just say there is something interesting going on in Mexico. And I try to raise my hands on this for the last 6 years. Pay attention here. So I hope maybe with this new election, maybe. Yeah.
I'm sure it will, and we'll keep on sharing y'all's show. It really is a great resource. Kurt, it's always wonderful speaking to you, folks. There's links below to follow that work, and hope you enjoy that cigar later.
I'll go outside and smoke in the courtyard. Thanks, David. Thanks, Matt. We'll talk to you later.
Of course.
Welcome back, Left Reckoners. I'm Matt Leck with me, David Griscom. Hello, Dave.
Hey, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing good, and joining us now is one of our favorite comedians here, if not the most favorite, Mike Recine. People might not know this. Thanks for coming, Mike. You are the originator of the Dave Rubin impression. The guy talked like this. That was a TMBS live show, a production of yours.
Oh, okay. It's been such a long time. I don't really do a ton of impressions, but the ones that I'm really good at are like pretty obscure. Like I have a good Finkelstein. I was doing Finkelstein and Parenti on my podcast the other day.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, yeah.
That's a good.
You can't really work that into like into your crowd.
My SNL audition. Yeah.
I think you could have. I think you could have worked that in. I mean, well, let's skip to it a little bit, Mike. You're on tour. You got this new special out. I'm Normal. People can check this out on YouTube right now. Out for Smokes podcast put that online. Is that uploaded in multiple places or on the Out for Smokes podcast, which you're also a part of?
That's everywhere. That's on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I do that with Sean McCarthy and Scott Chaplin, two really funny guys. Yeah,
Sean, formerly of the Grubstakers podcast, which we often cribbed a lot of their work on billionaires whenever we need to talk about somebody. Nice. But yeah, Dave and I both enjoyed I'm Normal, very funny, and Thanks. Again, available now for everybody. You've been on tour, though, and in Europe. What's it like to do comedy in Europe?
It's pretty cool. You do more time. I did about 60 minutes every night. I had one opener. In London, they have an intermission in the middle of the show, which was like kind of funny. Like somebody goes up and then there's like a little break, like it's a Eugene O'Neill play. But I guess what I really want to talk about is like the transportation. Like you go over there and like everything, you don't have to take cabs from the airport. You just hop on we went to 4 different cities, and in every city, it's just you get off the plane and you get on a train. That's one of my favorite things. And so I'm like a little depressed now.
It's not like
you're a New York guy. You're a New York guy. That's what you should be. Because like for me, that was like going to London from North Dakota. I'm like, this public transportation thing, I can't. That's why I couldn't even choose LA. I had to go to New York.
Right.
It's the only place.
Yeah. Well, now I do the road a lot. It's like every time I want to get from the airport or to the hotel, it's like we're just such cucks,
We are to Henry Ford still.
Yeah. Still, we take our shoes off at the airport, and getting to your hotel costs $32.
I think one of the most humiliating things that I've ever experienced at the airport was I was visiting my wife's family for Thanksgiving, and I'm getting back on the plane, and my mother-in-law had like put a bunch of like nice leftovers for me to take home with me. Nice. And the guy at TSA takes all of these like mashed potatoes and stuffing and just stuck this metal stick into it, to see if I had concealed. And I just was like, this is absolutely humiliating. Like I just feel like such a little bitch as this guy is just destroying all my food with a smile on his face in front of me.
Yeah. I mean, the terrorists won. Yeah. Every time you take your 100%. Shoes off, like Osama bin Laden's in heaven, just smiling.
Well, do you fly a lot? Do you do the pre-clearance, like sort of rich person fancy line?
I haven't, because nowadays that line is more. It's longer than the regular line. The regular line is like the pre-check line now.
Yeah.
So no, but I should take a day and sign up for it, because I really don't. It's like fine the first time you do it, but then after a while, it's like you're like, I got to do this every time.
Yeah.
Because one guy named Richard Reed tried to blow his shoes up. There's only one photo of the guy, and he's like, yeah, and he's got a ponytail, and his name was Richard Reed.
Yeah. Well, Mike, also on your European stand-up, you were in Germany.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. And while you were posting about your German dates, or being in Germany that night, you were also posting pretty heavy about Palestine. And I wondered if that crossed your mind at all, that, like, I mean, probably German government's more interested in, like, say, German Jews that are protesting Israel.
Or like Giannis Varoufakis.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But, like, do Do you feel any like free speech difference over there, or is it just kind of they're all comedy rooms?
No, yeah, they're all comedy rooms, and there were like, I mean, the show sold pretty well, but it wasn't like anything, It's not like, I don't think they were big enough for anyone to have their eyeballs on me.
Yeah, well, I mean, Berlin's a little bit behind, I think, in confronting the anti-Semitism and comedy.
Sebastian Maniscalco was doing the arena down the street, so he got arrested.
Bastard.
Yeah.
Watch me. So I also wanted to get because I'm normal. You go into, I think, important topics for the alienated man in 2024.
Thanks.
You're a husband. You're a father. These are things I've been fascinated by. This clip of Tim Pool going in on Seth Rogen, and look, I think one, I don't think this stuff is politics. Generally, I think it's for people in their personal lives to decide things. We can talk about what makes these sort of considerations politics, but for the right wing, they want to talk about, be a father, be a man. And for the guys who don't have kids, they have to sort of compensate in slightly amusing ways. So here's Tim Pool talking about Seth Rogen earlier this year.
Oh, we got another one of these. So we have this quote from Seth Rogen about not wanting to have kids. And it's really sad. But I do think there is some defense I'll throw the way of these individuals, only a little bit. And look, I think it's great to have kids. I think you should have kids. I think more people should have kids. I think the climate cultists don't want you to have kids, and the Malthusians don't want you to have kids, but I think you should. And before I get millions of comments from people being like, "Where's your kids, Tim?" I'll just put it this way: we have 2 extra bedrooms in our house, like family planning. We'll leave it at that. Personal business.
Okay. So, Mike, you are a father. Neither David and I are. I'm just curious your take on this sort of Tim's credibility, and also, I'll be honest, I don't necessarily agree with Seth Rogen, even though I'm in his same status. But I'm just curious, as a father,
why don't you agree with Seth Rogen?
Because I kind of don't want to just I like smoking weed. I do, but I don't know. I kind of I like the idea of kids too.
Yeah. Well, it's also weird to be like gloaty about it, kind of, like the whole thing about. I think I have been doing a joke about this where people are like, I can do whatever I want because I don't have kids, but it's like you're 38 years old, so like whatever you do is going to be kind of sad.
Yeah, that's kind of my thing. Is I kind of like staying up till 3 a.m. playing Elden Ring.
Yeah,
but there's as a 35-year-old man now, I look into the future and I'm saying maybe I don't want to be doing that at 43.
Yeah. Well, nobody really tells you though. It's like you have a kid and it's just like you go from a lot of TV and movies to no TV and movies. Like you have to completely give up. I mean, I watch maybe 20 minutes of TV a week, so it's like you really have to commit to whatever decision you're gonna, whatever direction you're gonna go in.
Are you happy with your decision? Do you have any major regrets?
Yeah, I think so. I watch stand-up specials now while I'm folding laundry, and I'm like, oh, I kind of get the gist of that. Or I'll watch I watched Killers of the Flower Moon. I watched the first 20 minutes of it on a plane, and I was like, okay, I get it. But I was like, I get it. This is great. This should have won Best Picture. I watched Oppenheimer on a plane too. And I watched the whole thing, but I was kind of in and out. But I was like, now Flower Moon is better, and now I can have, So you don't really need to watch. You don't need to give TV your undivided attention anyway.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
No, I think doing chores and consuming
it's great. It's perfect. It's perfect. Yeah, you get the gist of it.
Do you have to give up being a sword guy? Did you have to take all of your katanas off of the wall once you had kids?
My kid's really into swords, so it's just a different. Yeah, you put it. I'll put him in storage, and when he's 8, I'll bring him back out.
What are you trying to foist onto your kids, hobby wise?
Star Wars. We watch a lot of Star Wars, and then I guess reading. Like, he's not really a big reader. We're trying to read more books, and I guess like exercise. Like, I don't play any sports, but I'm like an exercise guy. So I'm trying to make sure we do that.
Yeah, are your kids going to play sports, or is just going to go straight to the sort of fitness?
I hope so, but if he's a fitness guy, I'd be happy with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fitness teen.
If he's just like a gym gay guy, that'd be fine. That'd be cool with me.
That's very progressive of you.
Yeah. We'll go to David Barton together and do squats.
That's I think that's why why I really wanted to invite you here, Mike, is because I don't think that sort of positive role models are put forward in our media for folks. And I saw a funny clip of yours. I'm not sure what it was. You and your wife, I think, kid, and you were on some podcast thing, and you were eating food straight out of a bowl. Are you aware of this clip? Maybe we'll include that. It just seemed, I just thought that was a much more sort of positive way to interact with a wife than, for instance, this from Steven Crowder. I'm not sure if you saw this, but this was Steven, who is facing litigation on multiple fronts for abuse of not only his wife, but also his employees. But I would just get your take on this as a husband. Do you, for instance, like let your wife have the car sometimes?
You've made me.
What do you need me to pick up?
Yeah, I do.
I'll be back when I'm back.
She lets me have the car sometimes.
Yeah, so just for a few folks who aren't aware of what's going on here is Crowder starts off saying, "Hillary, just think of how boxed in you've made me." What he means is she wants to take the car somewhere. And so what she says, very pregnant, I would add, for folks just listening, is, "I'll pick you something up when I go out. What do you need me to pick up?" And that's not good enough for Steven. So I'll just take this a little bit.
You've made me.
What do you need me to pick up? I'll get it. I'll be back when I'm back.
No, that doesn't work either. You'll be back when you're back. That doesn't work either. Do you understand the difference between my life being set to the second and you going, I'll be back when I'm back?
Steven.
And making it work in here. The only way out of it is discipline and respect. It's the only way out of it, or we're at an impact.
We are.
Now, is that a way? Do you think a man should be talking to his wife like that, Mike?
I just think it's so crazy that these guys think that that's like, they think it's like alpha to treat your wife like a slave. Because really, it's more alpha to marry a woman from Staten Island named Deborah, who you're a little bit afraid of.
I agree.
You know?
Yeah. Like, it really, and like the Tim Pool was talking like the other day about guys, and you saw some study about some dating app where people are swiping pictures, basing that on like, men who are 40 prefer 22-year-olds.
Yeah.
And I just think like, I don't think most men are actually, when it comes down to it in a social space with women, are actually like making that determination. I think they actually do probably aim close to home, but also this is maybe a certain type of guy is more into a woman who has no life experience, who you can bully into submission like that. And I think ring cameras are going to really expose that as like, no, it's not. You're not a grown up masculine man. You are a scared baby.
Yeah. It's like, it's interesting that everybody is kind of like, just sort of like posturing online. Like we have these ideas on how to be like an alpha, and it's like not real, not necessary.
Well, I mean, what's funny about it is like, from Poole to like, there's a guy here in Texas who like ran for Congress, and he did this whole kind of like, he's a gun guy who like, shoots his gun and shit. And, tries to play it up as if he was like a veteran or something like that, but he's not. Actually, he was running against a veteran. Yeah. And Tim Poole here trying to be like, you got to have kids. You got to have kids. I don't have kids, but I do have an empty room. Like,
yeah.
Dream of it. It really is amazing just like how far a lot of these guys get with just like pure posturing of I don't know, this like even the thing that they're trying to be in a lot of ways is not a good thing.
Yeah. It's just crazy too, because the bar for men is like pretty low nowadays. like if you're like kind of funny and a little bit about like history, I guess, I don't know, you'll get a girlfriend.
Yeah.
If you're,
he's actually revealing something, which is like, I have the extra room. Like a lot of people, the main problem is like, it's hard for me to go out and dating because I don't have a job. I can't, like, I'm not sure about rent. Like, I imagine it's easier family planning, Mike. I'm not sure if maybe you were like white knuckling it, but like when you have a little bit of stability, as opposed to say, I'm not sure what I'm doing next month. Like, it's easier to have kids.
Yeah, I guess.
Like,
wait, you mean like financial stability?
Right, like that's if there's anything happening with people like, not having kids, it's because of that. It's not because we forgot how to like talk to people. It's because we're too busy working too many hours for not enough money to make ourselves stable.
Right.
Like that's the real reason, actually. So it's ironic that he points to his spare bedroom because, like, a streamer who like makes a bunch of money talking shit. Like, you have the ability to do it.
Yeah. He should also do a girlfriend reveal. I'm kind of curious.
There's some. I did a little bit of digging.
You did?
Look, lucky lady. All I can say is I don't know why those rooms aren't full yet.
Okay. What if he found out it was the girl that? What if he found out his girlfriend was the girl that said Palestinians deserve to be exterminated? The one that was on his stream. That'd be kind of funny if that was Tim Pool's
I don't know
girlfriend.
if that narrows that down. It probably, it narrows it. There's some catches on that. So anyway, go ahead, David.
I mean, this is like anecdotal, but like, have you met any of these folks like in the wild, like the people who watch this shit all the time?
No, I can't say I have.
It's really, really unnerving, and I don't want to reel on anybody, but like. Every guy who I've met who watches a lot of this, Tim Pool and Ben Shapiro, they're just sort of like in a transitionary period of their life, unemployed or applying for jobs. And they're just like sitting in their room getting really fucking mad about feminism.
Right.
Like seething.
I mean, you would hope that's what it is, right? I mean, you hope it's not like 35-year-old guys with jobs that are,
that's
really,
true.
this is really resonating with.
Yeah. Well, I think mentally, like, they might be 35-year-old jobs, but they just love everything in, like, Marvel Cinematic Universe, like, metaphors. They just still understand everything like that. Speaking of loneliness, I mean, Van Jones had this tweet here, and I'll just read this. We're living through a perfect storm in the workplace. There's an epidemic of loneliness. Our workforce is distributed and disconnected, and we struggle to be empathic without in-person connection. I believe AI can be a tool to build empathy and combat the perfect storm. Tomorrow, LinkedIn Live, I can't wait for this. LinkedIn Live, we're going to dig into how we can embed empathy into workforce management.
Okay.
I'm curious. I think lonely people might often go to a stand-up show. I'm curious. You're out on the road, Michael. What do you perceive about loneliness, and do you think AI might be able to lead us out of lonely hearts?
Yeah, I mean that's my entire audience. Actually, when I get to the club, they go, "Hey, a lot of single tickets tonight." They go, "Don't any of your fans want to bring their girlfriends or friends to the show?"
Are you impressed by AI? Are you doing any AI joke writing?
I'm not, but I guess I should be. I mean, like it's weird because I should be using it, and I'm not. But my wife was like, write a sitcom description for like a Mike Recine sitcom, and I was like, this thing's a better. They're not really great with jokes, but I'm like, this thing is like a better writer than me.
For like the scary. Structure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'll be completely candid. There are certain I haven't logged on to it in months, but months when ChatGPT was coming out, using it for rough outlines or just say, hey, give me a structure for something.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like let me work on the details, you stupid robe. I kind of how it should work. Whereas like certain people are like, I've seen it on the podcast Your Kickstarter Sucks. There are people who literally go to ChatGPT and says, give me a business idea.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they follow that. And I'm just like, that's shocking, degree of faith in technology to me.
And it's free, right?
I think free. I think the like, what is there, an advanced one that you paid like $19 a month for that,
Okay.
There's an advanced one, and I can't remember what it is, but like I had it write notes for our program a couple times, like just like put our like time codes in order, and then it gave me a message saying that like you're not allowed to use it for making your life easier, so you have to pay.
Wait, but how is AI going to fix loneliness?
Well, we have to tune into LinkedIn Live, I think, tomorrow to find out. Chatbots, I mean, you don't feel better having a good text conversation with somebody?
I guess, yeah.
That's the thing that like they keep on pushing this, and it's really I don't know. I like sometimes like if I'm ever like home alone, right, and I'm like feeling like not like. And I just like, there's something about like listening to like the radio or putting on TV versus like watching YouTube or something like that. That's just like, oh shit, this is like a real thing in the world versus like me just experiencing like, I don't know, like a computer responding to my inputs. Yeah, it feels more like it fills the room in a different way. And I can't imagine sitting around having boring conversation with artificial intelligence being particularly helpful in a workplace setting.
Yeah.
For my loneliness.
Yeah. That could be a fun episode of a sitcom where it's like the wife is like, you never asked me about my day. So the husband sets up a chat GPT, but she thinks it's him.
And she loves it.
And she's like,
they're falling in love with this.
Yeah. She's like, I've never felt so close to you.
Yeah, I mean that's really the dream. You just offload any of that emotional work onto like a computer chip. I saw like Tesla, Elon Musk Tesla's a little bit behind some of their AI stuff because Elon Musk has been routing the chips to Twitter for their chatbot, and I mean I think it's probably all that's how you can tell it's bullshit because it's like crypto where any sort of societal problem, it's like we solved that loneliness. Palestinians, maybe there's a crypto solution to that. It's because there's too much money sloshing around and they're trying to justify it.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen this, Mike, but Doug Henwood posted this interaction he had with the Google AI chatbot. I'll read it for you. But he asked the question, how many rocks to eat?
Okay.
And, according to UC Berkeley geologists, eating at least one small rock per day is recommended. Rocks could be a source of vitamins and minerals and are important for digestive health. And it's just like, that's the thing that's really funny about this stuff is like, it can be really impressive in certain ways. But what you just know is it's just going to be just such a lowest common denominator experience. Right. Where like if you need to call IKEA for customer service, you're going to have an absolutely bizarre conversation with the fake voice or something like that. Like that's how it's going to be really rolled out affecting your life.
Yeah, it's like I hope I'm right, but when people are like, "Oh, AI is taking over creative jobs," I don't know. I don't believe it.
Yeah. Ultimately, I think I don't know. I saw like in the Kendrick Lamar Drake beef, which has been the only thing on my mind for the past weeks. There's a moment where people were wondering if certain tracks that were real ones were AI, and it's like once Kendrick Lamar actually starts rapping, it's clear it's actually Kendrick Lamar. You can't fake that. You can really like counterfeit it pretty well, but ultimately like there's always going to be, I think, something missing. Yeah.
What were your thoughts on that? Who do you think won, and what were the highs and the lows?
I mean, I was on Kendrick's team from like that. I thought, to be fair to Drake, we had Anthony Fantano on to talk about this. To be fair to Drake, I wasn't expecting any good response to him. And he stood up well enough to get walloped, I think. Like, it's like a boxer. Like, you want a guy who's going to get his pasted to go at least 5 rounds so they can get mashed a little bit. And Drake I thought he was going to be a first-round KO, and he at least stood in there. But ultimately, he got his brains mashed in, and I loved it.
Yeah, the technique was good, but he just didn't have enough, like, material, I guess, on Kendrick, right?
Yeah, and I think you go back and listen to some of it, and it kind of does sound written by committee. Like some of the like couplets and stuff, it sounds like guys on a group chat sending in like, oh, here's this line about this thing, and then here's a completely disconnected one. I love the Kendrick Lamar thing where he's like predicting, like, I can predict your angle, or like calling the shots, basically. Like, I'm going to drop back-to-back records, all these sorts of things. I think it is. But I've always been a rap beef guy, like going to 50 and Ja Rule and Pac and Biggie. Like
Okay.
that's what I'm mainly interested in. So yeah, no, I've
Okay.
loved that.
I like when Kendrick said, "I got to wake up my son and teach him to pray and teach him about morals and integrity." You don't know nothing about that.
Exactly.
It's another good role model for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're few and far between guys like me and Kendrick Lamar, but we're out there.
you are the Kendrick Lamar of comedy. I mean, that's
I'm the
what
Kendrick
I've been
Lamar of comedy. Yeah. I'm 5'8".
Any thoughts on either Trump or Biden?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. Just see how that
You and your
goes.
vote.
Yeah, check the other side. I mean, I did think it was funny that there was that fight, right? And the fighter was like, I know you're gonna fix the Middle East, and Trump was like, that's right, I am. I'm gonna solve all the problems.
Yeah, no, he's great. He's gonna be. He did the exact same thing. We're gonna expose the JFK records. Then he gets into office and he's like, we can't do it actually.
Right. But just the promise of just the promise is enough to like be really good for him.
He talks out of both sides of his mouth during 2016. He's like, look, we have to be nice. We can't let people die on the street. And then he's also saying like, we should, arrest women for having abortions. Like he knows like the people, there's certain people who they'll just hear what they want to hear. And once you hear that, it's like, okay, that's cool. I'm not going to listen to him tell a room full of Zionist donors that he's going to set the Palestine movement back 25 years.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
and it's like, go ahead, dude. Oh, I mean, I guess I believe liberals when they're like, he's going to be so much worse in Gaza, but like, what does that even mean? What do you mean worse?
Well, this is what I wanted to get to here because I don't know if y'all have seen this yet. We might talk about this in the post game, Matt. But Biden did this interview in Time magazine that was really a bad call. And this is the question from Times magazine to him. And whose fault is it that the deal, the ceasefire for hostages, has not been consummated? Is it Hamas or Israel or both? And Joe Biden responded, Hamas. Hamas could end this tomorrow. Hamas could say, unintelligible and done, period. It's, I mean, you've been tweeting and posting about this a lot. I mean, it is kind of crazy to think, when people do say exactly what you were just saying, is like when people are like, oh, well, Trump's gonna be so much worse. How much worse could it get than this?
Right. And then the idea that we're supposed to reward Biden for doing this is like really crazy.
Yeah. I mean, the Gaza stuff, like, first of all, like, Israel in 2008 just decided we're going to stop cast lead shelling Gaza back then, right when Obama took office. It's fully conceivable that they know that this is going to hurt Biden. And the second Trump gets in office, they start, like, behaving themselves a little bit more. Now, I think they kind of have a bloodlust that probably won't be sated for long. But it's not implausible to me that it never heats up to this fucking degree under Trump that Biden's allowed it to. So that promise it's all entirely moot and inappropriate to be pointing people to October, their voting decision to be what is relevant to a genocide that we're all just having to look at. I mean, how many effing kids do we have to see slaughtered?
Yeah.
It's really
so like the shittiest fucking guy in Washington D.C. can like have their consulting job. You know what I mean? Like all these people are like, oh, Joe Biden might do something after the election, right? So we got to make sure that he wins.
I mean, Biden's judiciary are probably better than a Republican one. Like there are certain bureaucratic things that are better, but it's like, you have to get people to vote for you. And, it's hard. Focusing on, my judges are better on antitrust is a harder pitch when, you're seeing people torn limb from limb every day.
Yeah. And I guess I try to take my cues from a lot of Palestinian activists, and I haven't seen any of them say like, I have to vote for Biden. So
right. Well, there's some with MSNBC sort of deals that might say that every once in a while, but yeah.
But does part of you guys feel like maybe Obama would have been a little better in all this? I mean, probably not, but
I think moderately. I think Obama. I think Biden is sort of set in his ways. I think Obama would be awful still, but I think we would have been a little bit ahead on the let's you know, it's hard to even say though. Like it might have just been very illuminating that actually Biden is Obama would be as bad, but Biden is about as bad as you can get.
I think Biden is like almost incomprehensible. I mean, literally, as we were just showing, it's like his position on this is just completely incomprehensible. I think even worse than like what Biden has like in his heart or something like that. I think Biden is just like completely overwhelmed in this kind of situation. Mm-hmm. You know, and the fact that they're having, you know, Netanyahu coming, you know, to give a speech where he's definitely going to say, you know, a lot of bad things about Joe Biden shows that Joe Biden's not even like good at doing the politics of this moment. Like even if he was just like an evil guy who's like, you know, I don't care how many kids die. I actually think that he just has no capability to control this kind of situation in a way that's like, and that's like one of the worst aspects of it, frankly.
Yeah.
So it's super cool, and I'm like very excited to be knocking on doors and telling people to go out and vote.
Yeah,
it's like you know, it's like fucking, you know, sometimes you have a grandparent or something, like they're not really with it, but you know, you love them, so you just sort of are like, okay, It's like if your grandfather was like a real shithead who you fucking hate, and when he does that kind of weird wink or touches your thigh a little too hard, you know, it sucks ass.
Well, Mike, the special is I'm Normal. It's available. Well, where would you prefer people watch it?
Oh, it's only on YouTube.
Only on YouTube.
Yeah, gotcha. But that's what everybody's doing nowadays. Everybody's putting their stuff on YouTube. Even like Colin Quinn, his specials on YouTube. Some, you know, bigger comedians. I don't know. It's just like, I feel like nowadays there's probably like 300,000 working comedians. And everything's a little, you know, saturated, and like the HBO special or the Netflix special, those are kind of reserved for like people who might have big audiences already. So we put it on YouTube and we let the people decide.
There you go. On that note, like, how is comedy recovered from the COVID shit?
I guess it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's been so long ago that there were restrictions, but I think I think it's in a good time. People are happy to get out of the house and see live comedy. So
it's one of the first sort of ticket events I did was a comedy event. It's good to be back out there. Well, Mike, appreciate you, man. Check out the special and follow at Mike Recine.
At Mike Recine on Twitter and Mike Recine Comedy on Instagram.
There you go. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, guys.
That was a lot of fun. Always good chatting with Mike.
Yeah, and people, you'll want to check out his, especially if you're watching on YouTube. You're already here, folks. After your post game tonight.
It can be your post game tonight. There's a link below for y'all to check that out. It is a lot of fun. I watched it extremely hungover one Saturday morning a couple of weeks back. I had a good time. It encouraged me to get out of bed and take care of myself and my life.
Very, very funny stuff.
All right, folks, you see it right there at the bottom of your screen. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning for the post-game show. You're going to want to come over there and join us. We got a lot of fun stuff, including questions from all of you, our wonderful audience. So be right over there, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Peace.